really was about your experience of school, and also the A levels you chose and why you chose them.
So I did English, language and literature. I think it was a combined A level, and I did French, history, and theatre studies. And I chose them because they were just the subjects I enjoyed the most, and I knew that in order to go to the university I wanted to go to do law, I needed to get good A levels. So I thought it made sense to choose the ones I was good at. And I think for a law degree as well, it doesn't really matter what you take for your A levels, provided that they're kind of broadly the traditional A levels. So theatre studies was the fun one that I did because I really enjoyed it. But I think history, English, and French I thought were three fairly traditional A levels that I knew that the universities would want to see. But yeah, I think with law in particular, you can be fairly, you can just pick the ones that you enjoy because you can do any really. Doesn't matter as long as you're getting good grades in them.
And when you chose your A levels, did you know the course that you wanted to study, or were you still undecided?
Yes, I think I knew I wanted to do law quite early on. I remember at Merchants we did like a career aptitude test, I think when we were in lower five, maybe. And I had an idea then, and then we did that, and I think I got law and journalism, and I thought, right, that's it, it's meant to be. But yeah, I had an idea quite early on.
Okay. And did you know which university you wanted to go to?
I wanted to go to Oxford, and I was devastated when I didn't get in. Thought it was the end.
Really?
Yeah, and it just shows how much it just doesn't matter actually, because at the time, UCL was my backup choice, but it was still a great law school. But I was so upset that I didn't get into Oxford, and I thought I'd never become a barrister because I didn't go to Oxford. And actually, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's great if you can go there, but if you don't, then there are still lots of other really good law schools that you can go to. So yes, I wanted to go to Oxford, but ended up going to UCL, and that was great for me. And actually being in London was really fun as a student as well.
Did you ever consider doing another degree and then converting, or did you always know you were going to do straight law?
Yeah, I wanted to do straight law. So my brother actually, he's a solicitor, and he did history and then did the law conversion course, which I mean, it was he wanted to do it that way, but I found the law conversion course was quite a lot to pack into a year. And I just thought that I personally would do better by having the 3 full years to get to grips with all the different types of law, because there's quite a few areas that you cover on your law degree. So there's like criminal law, commercial law, property law, tort, family. There's lots. And I just found that with the 3 years, you have a bit longer to kind of let that all sink in, get to grips with it. But I think that's just personal preference, really. I was eager to get started straight away, I think.
And did you always know you wanted to be a barrister, or did you consider being a solicitor, or did you keep it open whilst you were at university?
So I decided whilst I was at university that I wanted to be a barrister. I definitely wasn't sure at first. But when I was at university, it's such a personal decision, but you also learn that they are very, very different jobs. So as a solicitor, you'll have much more face-to-face time with the client. So when somebody has a problem, the solicitor is the first port of call. You'll be the one that looks at their problem, decides what legal claim you think they might have, and you help them at that initial stage. Once it's clear the matter needs to go to court, then you'll contact a barrister, and it's the barrister who will draft the legal documents, the barrister who'll go to court, do the trial, do the cross-examination. And I think for me, I quite liked the idea of going to court. I saw that as a challenge and something I'd enjoy. And I also thought I'd find it quite frustrating to hand something over to the barrister that I'd been preparing for a long time. So, and also another important point is that barristers are self-employed, all barristers, unless you work for the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. And I just liked the idea of being self-employed. I liked the idea of having more control over the days I worked and how hard I worked. So that was quite an important factor for me, but something that I didn't consider to university. And you definitely don't need to make that decision until, I would say, I think for solicitors, you need to be applying for VAC schemes in your second year of university. So you've still got quite a long time. You've got your whole first year to have a good think about what you'd like to do.
We've got quite a few lower six in on this conversation who are obviously starting to think about UCAS applications. I wondered, were there any things that you did whilst at school that you think helped your application?
Yes. So I remember that at Merchants we all did work experience. I can't remember when we did it, but we did it at some point, and I did mine at a law firm in Southport. So it was a week, I think, there. But they actually asked me to go back and work in the summer for 6 weeks, just as like a clerical assistant. Really, I just answered the phone, basically, put people through to solicitors. But it was really useful for me to be in a law firm and just understand how it operated, because I had no idea. Although I knew I wanted to be a lawyer and it sounded interesting, I didn't actually know practically how that job worked. So spending some time in a law firm, even though it was a small solicitors firm, but it was still invaluable, I thought, to have a better understanding of how the job actually worked in practice. So I think even if you can't get paid experience, if you can just offer up even a week of your summer holiday, just pester people I mean, I did it in Southport because that's where I lived, but just ask law firms, can you go in for a day, a week, whatever, just do anything that's useful, even if you're just making tea, answering the phone. It looks good on your application, I think. It just shows a bit of, get up and go, and that you're passionate and want to get the experience.
And so after university then, are you able to tell us the route that you took to get to where you are now?
Yes. So I did law and French law at UCL, which was great because I got to spend a year living in the south of France. So that was really fun. And it was great to be able to go to a French university for a year. In order to be a barrister, you've got to get your degree, your law degree, whether that's straight law or conversion. But after that, you've got to do your bar exams. So after university, I went straight to bar school to do my barrister exams. And while I was there, I realised that the next stage, which is called pupillage, so you do your bar exams, and if you get through that, then you've got to do pupillage, which is a 1 year. It's you go to a barrister's chambers and you spend a year there, and essentially they train you up for a year. And at the end, if they think you're good, they'll take you on. And if not, then you need to go and do that process again, another chambers. When I was at bar school, I realised that lots of the people applying for pupillage around me had master's degrees, or they had long-term legal work experience. So they'd been paralegals at law firms for like a year or so. And I realised that I didn't think that just my degree on its own was making me as competitive an option as the other people I was applying with. So I decided to go back to university. So I went to Cambridge and did a master's in commercial law, which was really great for me because at university, when you do your law degree, as I just mentioned, there are so many different areas of law that you get to grips with. And although it's super interesting, I had an idea that I wanted to do commercial law, but I'd only really studied it for a year. So you don't get as an in-depth idea of that practice area. So when I did my master's, I really focused just on the commercial law. And I think that gave me such a good grounding to go into pupillage because I had spent an additional year just drilling down into that subject, really. So I felt much more confident as well going to interviews for pupillage after that. So I did that year at Cambridge, and then I did get pupillage. So I did that for a year at a barrister's chambers called Three Hare Court in London. So pupillage, essentially you spend the first 6 months following around your supervisor, who's another barrister in chambers, somebody more senior, and you literally just follow them around, shadow them, watch them, learn how to do it for 6 months. And then your second 6 months, that's when they make you do it. So that's when you start to take on your own cases, which is really scary at first. And anybody that says it isn't is lying. It is scary, but everybody's scared. Everybody feels the same. So I remember my first day in court was a road traffic accident. So I was just having to tell the judge who bumped into who and who should pay whose damage for the car. I was so nervous. My hands were so sweaty. I had to put them behind my back. But I think it's really important to know that everybody feels that way. So I think there's an impression of barristers that everybody, they're super confident, they're really good at public speaking, and that's just not true. It's something that you learn as you go. So anyway, I was really nervous, but survived it. And so there for the next 6 months, you carry on taking on relatively straightforward cases. So it's nothing super complicated. For me, it was always road traffic accidents. That's how the chambers I was at kind of taught you how to do cross-examination. So yeah, I did that the final 6 months doing those sorts of cases. Then I was taken on at Three Hare Court as a barrister, and I worked there for 5 years. And then I've just very recently actually moved to Wilberforce Chambers. I moved there a couple of months ago. So I now specialise in commercial and insolvency work, which the commercial work, I would say, is the easiest way to explain that is it's any sort of company dispute. So breach of contract would be the most straightforward explanation. So where a company has sold goods to another company and they don't match the description, there's something wrong with them and the company needs to bring a claim. That's kind of under the broad heading of commercial law. And then insolvency is where companies have gone into liquidation. So pretty important in the current climate, actually, because unfortunately there's lots of companies struggling, lots of companies can't pay their bills. So when they go into liquidation, then liquidators are appointed. And as a barrister, you act for the liquidator in bringing claims against the directors of the company if they haven't always behaved in the way they should have done. They may have breached their directors' duties, or you can defend the directors against those sorts of claims. So that's what I do now. I'd say my job as a commercial barrister is different to a criminal barrister. So my friend who's a criminal barrister, they're in court every day, and that's what you can expect as a criminal barrister, up and down the country every day, new case, new hearing, new trial. Whereas as a commercial barrister, it's much more paper based. So I do a lot of advice work. So solicitors will email me and say, I've got this company, they're in trouble, this is the problem, can you advise them? And you'll do a written advice to tell them what to do. But I mean, things do get to trial, but I think with commercial law, they tend to be much bigger cases, so there's fewer of them. But when you do a trial, they'll be a couple of weeks long, and then you'll have a short break after that one and then start again on the next one. So I think that's something to think about as well as a commercial barrister, is you won't be in court every day like a criminal barrister would be. There is more.
It's really interesting. So when did you make the decision about commercial law then? Because obviously your role was slightly different at your previous chambers.
Yeah, so I still did commercial work at my previous chambers. I think I decided I wanted to do commercial work at university, so I did commercial law at university. It's one of the modules that you can do, and I enjoyed it. Then by the time I'd done my masters, I was quite sure that was what I wanted to do. My previous chambers, they're what's called a civil set, so they do some commercial work and then some civil work. So that's like personal injury work, employment work. And for me, I found that I was just doing more and more commercial work. It made sense to be somewhere that just focused on that, as my new chambers do. But I mean, I suppose, yeah, that's another thing as a barrister. If you do want to have more of a mixed practice, then you can go to a mixed set where you could do a little bit of personal injury, a little bit of employment. So you have more of a mixed practice. So that's what you wanted to do.
And then what are the best and the worst things about your role as a barrister then, Rachael?
You know, I had to think about that. I think the best part of my job is being self-employed is great. So my friends who are at big law firms in London, I mean, their hours are really seriously long. There's no point not telling people about that because it's just something that's true. You know, you are expected to be in work at 9:30 a.m. and they don't finish until late, 9:30 p.m., 10. And I just wasn't really sure that was what I wanted. I didn't think I'd want to work those sorts of hours all the time going forward. And I felt that as a barrister being self-employed, I'd have more flexibility over my hours, which I do. So if I have a big trial on, then obviously I'm working those sorts of hours too. It's not that it's not hard work, but if I want to, for example, take a couple of weeks off because I have just done a massive trial, then I can do that. So that's the best part about it, I'd say, is having control over your practice area and your working hours. But then the worst part, which is probably linked to that, is being self-employed means that there's no financial stability in your job. So if you do take those 2 weeks off, then you're not being paid. So you've got to be quite good with money and get a good accountant to work out how you're going to afford to take time off. So I'd say that was the worst. And I suppose, yeah, it is long hours. I know at university, lots of friends I had were out, you know, during the week going out to party clubs, and that's just not something that you can do if you want to do well in your law degree. It is hard work. Did go out the weekends, did have fun then, but Monday to Friday it was very much heads down working for my law degree. So I think that's just something to bear in mind as well, because it will always be fairly long hours.
And what advice would you give to our current students that are looking at possible careers and university courses and pathways?
I think if you want to do law, if you know now in sixth form that you want to do law, is to try as hard as you can to build a CV. So as I said, even if it's just going to a law firm, even if you just go for 1 week in the summer, and even if you don't get paid to do it, which is, I wouldn't expect you really because it is work experience, start to build things like that. Because I think by the time I applied for pupillage, I had about 4 years worth of me trying to build a CV, and it looks impressive that you've tried from an early point to build a CV. So work experience is really important. Trying to think what else I did as well. I think I bought on secondhand a law textbook, I think a commercial law, and just had a flick through it as well, just to check, to get an idea that it was definitely for me. Because I think when you're in sixth form, obviously you haven't ever done law before, even if you can just give some explanation at your university interview as to what got you interested in it in the first place, what steps have you taken to make sure it is something that you want to do and you will find interesting, what experience do you have? Just think about, they're the sorts of questions that you'll be asked to interview. So just try to build answers to those questions now by doing work experience and as much research as you can, really.
Are you able to tell us about any of the specific cases you've been working on recently?
Yeah, so I think the thing about commercial law, it never sounds very interesting. So when you do crime, you can say, oh, I've just had a 10-week murder trial and this happened and it was gangs and this. But with commercial work, I suppose the trials that I do will be, and have recently done, or where directors of companies have taken money out of the company they shouldn't have taken, but over a really long period of time. So say their salary as a director is, I don't know, £100,000 a year, but in fact they've been withdrawing about £1 million a year from the company wrongly and spending that on other things. And then that's all well and good while the company's going forward and has a life in it and nobody will notice. But the minute something goes wrong, so once the company goes into liquidation, and you have an independent liquidator come in and look at the books and records of the company and says, hang on a minute, where's that £1 million a year going? So then you have that kind of review and you can find out the extent of the fraud against the company. So that's a trial that I've done recently. And yes, you'll have a 2-week trial where you'll cross-examine the director. So you'll have to go through all of the records of the company, all of the bank statements, and present them to him really when he's in the witness box. And you just say, so that was your salary, X amount, and this is how much you were taking, Y amount. And put that to him and see what his explanation is. And they've always got great explanations as to what it's for. It never really pan out. But I think that's the thing with commercial work. It's always going to be very document heavy, and it might not have the most immediately interesting facts. Like if you can say, oh, I've just done a gang murder trial. But with commercial law, for me, I think it's always more intellectually stimulating. So you'll have to work harder to understand the facts. If there's been some massive fraud on a company where they've used offshore bank accounts or they've bought shares in the name of another company, you've really got to drill down to work out how that fraud's happened, because it's clever, it's sophisticated how they've done it. And that's where I've always found it quite interesting to try and get to grips with those facts before you can even think about applying the law to them. So, I think that's the thing with commercial work, is you'll never be bored. You'll always be trying to get to grips with someone that's committed a very sophisticated fraud that you just think if they applied their mind in a non-fraudulent way, they'd probably have an amazing job anyway, because they're very clever.
I'm going to open it up to the students then and ask them if they have any questions they would like me to directly ask. Rachael, obviously anything advice-wise or about her job now, or does anybody have any questions at all? I know Lisa will want me to ask you your sort of fondest memory of school.
Oh, I've got so many. I absolutely loved school, and like I said, I'm still friends with the girls from there. We all went to university in London together, just coincidentally. Um, so many, but I think for me, Madame Michu was just such an amazing teacher, and our French A-level class was so fun. She really did inspire all of us, and I think actually everybody in her A-level class ended up doing French at university in one way or another, because none of us were quite ready to stop learning French because she just instilled such a passion in us. So I think that was one. And I suppose my other fondest memory of school was once we could all drive in upper six, was driving to Crosby Beach at lunchtime and getting chips and then going back to school for 1 o'clock.
Linked to what you said about French, do you think doing a language has helped you? Because obviously they're on a huge decline, particularly at A level, doing a language, and I wonder how you feel that's helped your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think truthfully, I don't use French in my job day to day because it is English law and they're English clients. I mean, I think the only way, if you were completely fluent in a language, then I suppose it'd be great if you had, I don't know, so say you were completely fluent in French and you had French clients. It's always good from a marketing perspective to be able to speak to them in French a bit. But I think in terms of doing law, it's not something you're going to be using every day. However, in saying that, I couldn't recommend more doing a language at A level, just because I just think it's something that's so useful in life anyway, just to be able to speak another language. That's point one. And then the second thing as well, when I did it at university, just having that year out as well in France, I just think from a personal, development point, it was great to go and move away. It was scary at first to go and move to France, but when I did it, it was great from a development point of view and great to have a year out, because your law degree is stressful and it's tiring and it's hard work. So having that year out in France, I mean, because you're an Erasmus student, they don't expect you to work anywhere near as hard as you're expected to work at your university at home. So it's much easier. You can, and they do expect you to spend time, exploring France, speaking French. So having that opportunity to have a year, which was between my second year and my final year, to go to France, explore it, experience the culture, do a bit of traveling around France. I think that was, as you say, that's just a really fond memory of university, actually, and something that I'd really encourage for that reason.
Next, we've got a question that's come in. So it's from Ellie, and she said she's hopefully going to study law with Spanish law at Leeds in September. Do you have any recommended reads for before she starts? Obviously, our current upper six are in a real state of flux at the moment, and I think lots of our really committed students are worried about the transition, and the gap that they're experiencing between now and when they start university. So is there anything you could recommend that Ellie should be doing now, Rachael, to help support her when she starts her course?
Yeah, I mean, well done, first of all. That sounds like a fun degree to do. And one of my friends did her year out in Spain, and it was just, I mean, she had such a great year. Amazing food, amazing weather. As I said, it's a great year just to kind of take a little bit of a step back from your law degree. But I think I would, firstly, I mean, I just wouldn't worry, because when you start your law degree on day one, your professors know that none of you have done law before. And in fact, at the university I went to, they preferred it that when you didn't do law, because I know you can do law A level now, but most universities prefer you just to come as a blank canvas, because, it's a packed course, and they will, day one is the most basic. Literally, I remember day one at university, they taught me that England doesn't have a written constitution, and I remember being like, I don't even know what a constitution is. That was where I was at in terms of I hadn't really looked at public law at all. So I wouldn't worry, because the universities know, firstly, they know that none of you have done law. Secondly, they know that just even in any one class at university, there's all different types of ability. So I'd say that they're prepared to take you day one and teach you the very, very basic. So if I were you, I would just, I mean, you, like I said, you could probably buy from Amazon if you wanted to, if there's an area of law that you're interested in. So say if you're interested, I always think crime, although you might not want to do it long term, it's the easiest one to get your head around at first, just because everybody tends to know a little bit about crime, right? Like, what theft is, what murder is. So you could buy on Amazon, if you wanted to, if you were super keen, a criminal law textbook. They're not expensive. I just get, £20. You could just buy one and have a flick through it over the summer, just to get your head, because I think most universities do crime in the first year. So you could read something like that, which might give you a bit of confidence that you'll go in knowing a bit more about crime. Or public law, you could get a basic something on public law, which would teach you about the Constitution and separation of powers. I suppose they're quite basic legal stuff that you could try and get your head around. But that's only if you're super keen. I really would just use the time to relax while you can, because it will be hard work when you go. And like I said, I promise you, they will start you at the most basic on your first day. You won't need to have any knowledge of law before you start.
And another question from Oliver. He's asked if you can explain chambers and inns and what their role is.
Such a good question, because I didn't know that when I started. So the inns of court, there are 4 of them, and they're all in London, and they're all in or around Fleet Street, Temple area. And essentially, I mean, they don't do very much, is the first thing. You have to choose an inn. When you become a barrister, you need to pick one to be a member of. But all your inn will really do for you is the inns offer scholarships, which are really helpful for your bar course. So if you can't afford your bar course, which lots of people can't because it is expensive, then you should apply to your inn for a scholarship. So it's important to choose your inn based on where you think you might be most likely to get a scholarship. So Middle Temple has a reputation for really helping poorer students who are going on to do something like criminal law, which is really underpaid. So criminal students, not that they're criminals, but students that want to do criminal law, they really struggle because their starting salary as a barrister is so much lower than other areas, that somewhere like Middle Temple really looks out for those students and will help them get ahead. Then there's places like Gray's Inn and Lincoln's Inn, which are much more academic based. So I think for Gray's Inn, or certainly when I applied, you had an interview, but also did like a written test basically. And essentially, the cleverest people, they'll offer scholarships to. That's Gray's and Lincoln's. And then Inner, I have to say, I don't know very much about their scholarship process, but they're just my personal opinions, I should say, as well. But yeah, I mean, other than that, that's all your inn will really do. It will be where you apply for a scholarship if you want to apply for a scholarship. And also, I don't know if it's changed, I doubt it has. When I was trained to be a barrister, you've got to do what's called 12 dining in sessions, where you have to have 12 sit-down, formal, black tie dinners at your inn before you can qualify as a barrister. I know. And they're really fun. But so what they do is they have judges there and other senior barristers, and essentially it's really good for the students because you have 12 dinners where you can sit with judges and senior barristers and ask them questions, talk to them about applications. So the idea is that you have an interaction with the rest of the bar. So that's what they do, really. Other than that, they just house barristers' chambers in them. So in London, all of the barristers' chambers are located within one of those 4 inns. So my chambers is in Lincoln's Inn. My old chambers is in Middle Temple. So that's what they do, really. But they're quite collegiate in that, you become a member. And then if you ever needed any other help throughout your career, so right now, for example, the Inns of Court are all encouraging barristers to donate to a COVID-19 fund for barristers who don't have much work. And aren't getting paid as much. So that's really what they're there for, I'd say. That they're not going to affect your career on a day-to-day basis. It's more like, a bit like with merchants, how you stay an alumni. You join the inn and it's there to help you as your career progresses and anything that you need. And you're expected to give back to the inn in the same way. Like you might go back and teach advocacy courses for students. So that's what they're there for. And then the barristers' chambers, they're the private kind of entities through which you practice as a barrister. So although they have a name like Wilberforce Chambers, everybody in chambers is self-employed. So in our chambers, there's about 75 barristers who all operate from Wilberforce Chambers, which is a big building in Lincoln's Inn. And we all pay a contribution of our earnings for things like the receptionists, the clerks, the secretaries, the building. And that's how you operate as a chambers. So and all chambers are like that, whether they're in up north or in London, wherever, they all operate in that way. So that's the difference between them. Your in is something that you'll choose at the beginning. So usually just before you start bar school, you'll choose to be a member, and they'll help you with your scholarship. They'll organise your dining in sessions with you. You've also got student advocacy course that they'll organise for you. So it's a bit, I'd say, yeah, it's more collegiate, and they'll look after you as your career goes forward. Your chambers is where you'll work, so that'd be like your professional home, and that will be the brand name that you operate under.
Thank you. That was really comprehensive. Even I understand that. Great. Does anybody else have any more questions? I'm just waiting to see if the chat. That was a really comprehensive talk, Rachel. I think it was really informative without being sort of too much information, because I think it can be quite overwhelming, can't it, at this stage?
Yeah.
I think what we'll probably do is say thank you to you and let students go back to some of their online lessons. And if you hang on with me in case any more questions come through, does that sound okay?
Fine, yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much, Rachel. If you don't have any questions, you're more than welcome to leave. And if you do, just pop them in the chat, and Rachel and I will hang around for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Rachel.
No worries. Thanks.